All right, we'll call to order this meeting of the Joint Conceptual Workshop for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission. We'll just start off with a quick roll call. Commissioner Allen's not here yet. Commissioner Allen will not be here tonight. She's had a death in the family, so Commissioner Franks, Commissioner Harrison.
Present.
Commissioner Lindsay is present, Commissioner McLemore present, Commissioner Mann not yet, Commissioner Orr.
Commissioner
Present.
Mann did email. He's on his way.
He's on his
just
way,
running late.
okay. And Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Hello. And Commissioner Williamson not yet. Alderman Berger. See. Alderman Brown not yet. Alderman Potts.
Present.
Okay. Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And Barnhill, Blanton, and Caesar not yet. And Mayor Moore.
Present.
All right. We've got two items to cover tonight. Got 15 minutes delegated for item number one. Item number one is discussion of a development plan revision proposing a new building type, that being townhomes, in the subdivision, resulting in a decrease of approximately 64 dwelling units on 244.8 acres located at 1518 Lewisburg Pike, the South Vale PUD. So I'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Thank you. This one is fairly straightforward. The applicant is requesting to introduce the townhome building type to the South Vale PUD subdivision, which is now supported with the current version of Envision Franklin. So as the caption said, it would actually, they're turning multiplexes into townhouses, which would result in a reduction in overall residential units. And staff is supportive of the request. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joey. I'm Matt Huff with Gamble Design Collaborative, and I'll try not to repeat because, like Joey said, this is kind of simple, but I do want to at least show you where these changes are happening on the plan. So if you wouldn't mind. Oh, yes. All right. Perfect. Okay, so the previous master plan and the proposed master plan, if you look at them next to each other, there's not a whole, you almost can't tell the difference. The reason is the actual road network just hasn't changed much. What's changed is we're going to replace a number of multiplex buildings with townhome units instead. So I'll show you where those changes are happening. Just have a laser. Yes. So the colors don't show up real well on the projector here, but right here, there's a pod. It's a lighter brown pod. These are all used to be multiplex units, now are shown as townhomes. Same here in this little strip here. So that's at the north end of the site. If we move south to the central portion of the site, there's one strip right here. Yep. And then if you go to the southern portion of the site, there are two strips, one there and one there. So as Joey mentioned, because you can't get to the same density with townhomes as you can with multiplex buildings, the total unit count comes from 512 down to 448. We still have over 150 acres of open space. And here we'll show you the approved single-family homes, the approved multiplex style home, which will have 3 to 4 units in it. And then here you can get a feel for the character of the townhomes that are proposed to replace a number of those multiplex homes. Lastly, I wanted to mention, if you've been out this way recently at all, you've probably seen some construction at the intersection of Goose Creek Bypass and Lewisburg Pike. That construction, those improvements were approved with the original development plan at South Vale. And from what I understand, they're due to be complete sometime in the spring of 2025. With that, I will answer any questions you've got.
Okay, so you mentioned the typical multiplex unit would have 3 or 4 units in it.
3 to 4, yeah.
How, and a townhome unit would have
Ma-
upwards of
Maximum of 6.
6 units?
Yes.
And those are multi-floor
Correct. You own from
individual
floor to
units.
roof, whereas the others would be stacked.
Stacked, okay, okay. All right. Comments or questions? All right, Alderman, any questions or comments from the alderman tonight? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, item number 2 tonight is discussion of a future Envision Franklin Plan Amendment request, potentially requesting a change from the rural reserve design concept to the village green design concept for the Smith family properties, approximately 474.94 acres, located along the north and south sides of Murfreesboro Road, east of North Chapel Road, and west of Trinity Road. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chairman. So just as a status update on where we're at in the process, no Envision Franklin plan amendment request has yet been formally submitted, but the property owners have requested to have this discussion at the joint workshop tonight to get some initial feedback. They have submitted an annexation request, which is currently in the annexation initiation stage, where staff is preparing a draft plan of service that would be discussed at the January 14th work session. And at that point, we'll go through various discussion related to the annexation proposal, how city services could be provided, and what infrastructure requirements would be necessary as part of annexation. But this is really just a step that's studying the services and infrastructure at that stage. It's not an actual annexation step at that point. Then on February 11th, there would be a public hearing at the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting when they would be considering the initiation step for the annexation. After that, if it moves forward, the applicant has said that they would likely submit an Envision Franklin plan amendment request depending on how the discussion goes tonight and where the annexation initiation step leads. So if everything continues through the process, you would likely see this Envision Franklin amendment request at the March Planning Commission meeting. Staff has not evaluated this proposal yet since no formal Envision Franklin amendment request has been made, but most of you will recall that during the 5-year comprehensive update to Envision Franklin that we made earlier this year, it was originally drafted with these properties being designated as Village Green. But after a public hearing, the Planning Commission amended the design concept to rural reserve, which is what it stands today. So I'll turn it over to the applicants for their presentation and subsequent discussion by the elected and appointed officials.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for giving us the time. I'm Steve Smith. I represent the Smith family. We're a third generation of home builders and lived in Williamson County all our life. About 70 years in business. We did our first project in Franklin 50 years ago. And we've done the most successful seniors living project in Franklin ever. So we've owned this property almost 50 years. And it's the eastern gateway to our city, and we've dreamed about a legacy project. Reese and I won't live to see the end of this. It's a 20-year project. And we've dreamed about how to preserve and what will be remembered for, and this is it. It's also a great opportunity to have 500 acres, and that's close, and Emily tell you, I usually exaggerate more than that. We have 500 acres for you guys and girls to plan instead of 20, 15 or 20 acre and take up all of it. So we can either have urban sprawl or we can have a real development we'll all be proud of. And if there's a problem there, you're gonna be able to find us. We go to church here, we eat dinner here, we go to school here. So that's my pitch, and thank you for seeing us.
So good evening, Jeff Hines with Catalyst Design Group. For those of you that were in your roles back in 2018, we probably had, you'll remember having a lot of this discussion back then. So the difference may be I have more gray hair and less hair overall than back then. But what I wanted to start with is what is different today from how things were in 2018 when we discussed this and came before you. And, back then, we had a highway improvements to Highway 96 budgeted by TDOT, but today we have a 4-lane median separated highway in place that runs through this site and even further to the east. Non-contiguous annexation has been approved. I think that actually happened in 2018 during that time. The Envision Franklin has been updated since then, and there are new planning tools that I think really craft themselves toward this property, and the Village Green being one, with 70% preservation of a site, which, as Emily mentioned, this is right under 500 acres. It would equate to 332 acres of the site remaining open space, natural preserved area. Existing tree stands is where we're focusing that preservation. And then lastly, the state legislature within the last year enacted the ability for special assessment districts. And one of the stumbling points back in 2018 was infrastructure and how the city, could be a partner or not be a partner in extending infrastructure out to this property. And this is the single largest remaining undeveloped parcel of land in Franklin's eastern urban growth boundary. So if this project isn't a leverage point to bring infrastructure that can solve the long-term needs of the city out there in terms of sewer instead of septic systems on lots as they develop, you really lose that leverage point because of the size of this project. So this is a complex project. That's why we're here tonight, is to start the thought process, the communication process with this joint group, and let you become introduced to it, have time as we go forward with the annexation, sessions and workshops, and eventually a public hearing, give you time to react to it. What I will say tonight is by the January meeting, we have hired a firm to assess the special assessment district and show the economics of that and how this property can effectively extend infrastructure. And we have met with city staff. We have understood their desires of what that would look like, where it would go out to this area of the Franklin UGB. So that is something we can help solve as a development rather than cause issues of concern in that regard. What are the benefits of this project? Franklin, I think we've heard strongly that, the eastern UGB is one that you'd like to have a rural feel gateway into the city. I've had the pleasure of, out of the 3 gateways you have now, of being involved with 2 of those. You have Fieldstone on the north, you have West Haven on the west, you have Berry Farms on the south. All of those are quality developments, and that is what is being proposed here. But the difference is that the vision here, we've heard, is more of a rural feel. And that is something we're committed to, and I think the Village Green policy requires. I know you guys traveled down to Serenbe to see that. Certainly, that is part of the visioning tool for this. It's what the policy in Envision Franklin was based upon. Preserving significant amounts of informal open space, tree stands to help protect floodplains and agricultural character is another benefit, and developing at an appropriate scale and density for a rural character area. That would all be part of the proposal coming forward. And then, as I mentioned, the special assessment district capability is one that I think is truly unique. When we met with staff and with city administration, you know, the question was, it's brand new on the books, how do we use it? Those are all things we're committed to working through, but the advice to us was bring a consultant on board that understands that and develop the pro forma so you guys can see that and understand it. That is a tool that's been used in Texas, Florida, California, and several other states very effectively as far as extending infrastructure and helping municipalities to grow into areas consciously, effectively, you know, without cost to the city. So that'll be part of what we'll bring to you in the coming months. What I'd like to do is take you through a little bit of the information you had in your packet, but you can start to see the location of this property right at the intersection there of North Chapel and Highway 96, which is policied for neighborhood commercial in Envision Franklin as a little neighborhood center to provide commercial services, the daily services that people need, and help keep trips off people coming all the way in on Highway 96, you know, crossing Interstate 65 and creating congestion. So the vision that's in Envision Franklin today is for a commercial center node at that intersection. What we would carry forward in terms of this is the policy today, and you can see what is conservation there, and the lighter green is the rural reserve, and that turns to darker green as the village green policy. So as you're aware, Village Green retains 70%, but it also limits your abilities in terms of types of development structures. The majority, everything has to be two-story unless it is above a retail, which is what would be focused upon that intersection node. It has to be character-based and cannot, you know, scale-wise, be anything that you wouldn't find in rural character of housing styles. So that's important as far as noting it as well. The 2 points in this is creating that gateway that we did speak about, and then the preservation. I think the gateway is one, excuse me, staff suggested having a setback from Highway 96 greater than what West Haven has with the lake there to any structures, which I think is right at 450 or 500 feet from memory. We would go back behind the TVA line before any intense development. That's about 700 feet at the entry road. And anything that we would propose in front of that would be part of the rural farmstead character that is mentioned in as an approvable development style within Village Green. So the buildings that are there today can be incorporated to the extent that structurally they work, but anything that would be supplemented to that would be in that rural farmstead character. So basically 2 football fields of preservation of land for recreational uses and maintaining that rural character. This slide was put in just to help you visually see what 70% green space retainage actually appears like. And if I could find the, I'm looking for it. There we go. So you can also see, kind of screen back on here, you can see the tree rows and you can see the areas of this property that have tree canopy in place in large stands of hardwood growth. And those are the areas that we have focused upon in terms of retaining open space on. So we're not just providing and maintaining open fields. Certainly, we're doing some of that and would look at doing, wildflower meadows and so on and so forth. But we are also preserving tree stands, which would help the watershed overall. The other thing I'll use this drawing to present is there are developments already in place, the Ingraham Farm to the northwest of this, that currently their sewer goes across the ridge into the Spencer Creek drainage basin and thereby their sewer system. You have capacity in that, but that is the basin that also picks up all of Cool Springs. So any extension of infrastructure through this property can also be extended to serve properties that would have been in this basin to begin with. So it helps the long-term growth in areas like Cool Springs. This is the master plan as currently developed and envisioned for the property. Once again, we have a North Village. This is Fly Park right here. North Chapel, where it bends in the curve and then bends again. These two brown areas are the existing Envision Franklin neighborhood commercial areas that are in place today. Forgive my voice. But you see the total acreage is the 494. Of that, about 132 are floodplain, or about 40% of what would be preserved. So 60% is preservation of tree stands, preservation of additional open space, along with the floodplain area that runs through the heart. Mays Creek runs right down through the center of this site right here. This is Trinity Road over here that would have a tie-in, and these intersection points off of Highway 96 match locations of current driveways that were planned when TDOT was doing the widening. So there are curb cuts in those locations already in place. And then also, to help you understand this, we have started some visioning. These are images, some from Serenbe, some from local projects, some from different traditional neighborhood developments around the United States. But the villages all have a little bit of different character. When you went to Serenbe, you saw different groupings of areas that have a center community element that anchors a place for individuals to come, whether that's a coffee shop, whether that is retail, or whether that's just a community center to hang out. Thank you. I appreciate that. You never know. So the purpose of these slides is to help you start to get a feel for what these different villages can be developed as. This is the TVA easement running here. This is the preservation I spoke of open space. There's a hilltop here that has trees on it. Along with, this is where the existing farmstead, a couple barns, the horse stables are in that location. And those would initially be kept in place and repurposed to the extent they can be. But long-term, that would become the farmstead component as defined by your village green and your development character matrices. And then the other village, this is Fly Park. Once again, this is the road that connects down to Highway 96. And one thing Jimmy Wiseman shared was that the city has connections in the same general locations on your long-range roadway thoroughfare plan that we would be working with engineering to put those into place. So this north-south connection that ties up to North Chapel here is on the major thoroughfare plan, along with an east-west corridor which is one that, you know, we would look to accommodate. However, the thing I would say is the Village Green policy talks about preservation, and I think we'd work to try and see if that east-west connection is needed, because it would go through areas that are shown and being preserved, so. And then lastly, this is the property to the south side of Highway 96. Once again, the neighborhood commercial policy here at the corner. One of the uses allowed within Village Green is institutional. And we met with staff, and the vision was to try and move toward either an assisted living or independent living element of the plan out here, so that families could have loved ones as they move to that stage of life remain close by. There's nothing until you come all the way into I-65 really that, you know, starts to meet that need. So we would work with staff. I think, I don't want to put words in Emily's mouth, but the scaling of those uses was the main concern, more so than an institutional use. So that would be ground we would look at how we break up and not do a traditional 100-bed, you know, assisted living in one large building, but rather independent living nodules, smaller structures that meet the character of Village Green, but still offer that as a use for the residents out in the eastern portion of the UGB. And that is our last slide, so I will certainly open it up to all of you for questions. Tonight, and the reason we asked staff to put us on the agenda once again was to do an introduction of this and the details of it. There's a lot to consider, you know, in terms of all this. So we wanted to broach the conversation and begin it. Certainly, we can answer any questions tonight, but what we'd encourage and appreciate is all of you looking at this, considering this, asking good questions, you know, as this moves forward over the next couple months, which would result in a public hearing in February per the schedule Emily laid out. And to be honest, the reason we went for the annexation request first in stage one, because number one, we want to see that the city is interested in this and becoming part of the city of Franklin with the merits. If that were to fail, then certainly pursuing the plan amendment makes no sense to Envision Franklin. But we also want to pursue the plan amendment to Envision Franklin before we ever pursue full annexation, because the Village Green is the vision we have for what makes sense. I think it's the look that is appropriate for that area. I think it benefits the city in controlling your eastern gateway. But without that land use policy, rural reserve, you know, does not allow the property to develop in terms of what it can be if it remains in the county. So that's the process we would like to bring before you, is consider annexation. The city confirms yes or no on that, and then we talk about the amendment to Envision Franklin, so we know the future, and then pursue the final annexation. And with that, let you ask any questions you
Okay.
may have.
Michael?
Yeah, just, I remember the 2018 plan for this, and although how hard I tried to forget it, this is really good. I like the way you applied Village Green concept for this with all the open space, walking trails. Looking forward to see what y'all can do with it.
Thank you. I mean, we've worked hard to look at the opportunities and how they can apply, and I think the Village Green policy is perfect.
It is.
One thing you'll note that actually is in place now is that pedestrian and golf cart-sized connection under Highway 96 that can allow residents anywhere on this tract to get on a bike, hop in a golf cart on those paths. You know, I think some folks have said, I'd like to be able to ride my horse on some of the paths. You know, we'll see whether that is fully encapsulated or can be. But anybody can get to the village or the commercial node without hopping in a car if they so choose, and I think that's important.
Did the state provide any passage underneath 96?
Well, the Smiths, the Smiths paid for the state to put that crossing in.
So it's in.
That crossing is in.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Harrison?
I kind of sound like a broken record because I ask this a lot when this goes on out here. The Mays Creek Basin feasibility study, it might be, I don't know if it's a question for you or trust for staff. I know it was, as I remember, if my memory serves me correctly, it was started, but was it ever completed to see if it was even feasible to put sewer out in this area and the other water and the other police and the other?
Yeah, the basin study was completed and was presented to BOMA at a work session. We have worked with the applicant to plan on extending sewer in compliance with that basin study and what the most recent update shows. Some of that will be coming forward with the plan of service, the draft plan of service that we're still working on. But there is significant length of force main and gravity sewer that would be involved in extending to this property.
Thank you, Emily.
The one thing I'll supplement, I think that was a great explanation, but basically at the southern edge of this property, the discussion was to locate a temporary pump station until gravity were to run all the way down along the river in future extension. But locating it here and pumping back to the system that has capacity to accept it would open up all the rest of the basin, including those properties I mentioned, to now come through gravity sewer in this property and bring some of the ones that currently have lift stations up off Clovercroft and eliminate those. But that would take time. There's some distance in between those two.
Thank you.
So I think while we're concerned about the cost of infrastructure, that's not typically a concern of the Planning Commission as it is of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. But, I mean, this has been a topic of discussion on this project ever since it first came forward, the cost of providing the sewer service. Water obviously is provided by some of the utilities, but other things that come to my mind are things like fire protection. And are you close enough to Cool Springs, the fire station on in the east of Cool Springs, that area, and what does that do to our fire rating across the city? You know, do you have a unit count? I mean, these are nice, little concise components of development. Are they all kind of? And I apologize, I'm asking a lot of questions without giving you time to answer, but it's kind of a Serenbe style, and is there a sense that there will be more of an agri-hood, more of a Serenbe style development in each of the three different areas, or will some be agri-hood and others be more traditional? I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, let me, that's probably the best plan. So I think it would be a little bit differentiated. Certainly the first phases of development would be west of Mays Creek, and the eastern will be the last phase, just from a standpoint of extending, infrastructure. That is where the crossing is, so the pedestrian and trail network can be brought as the commercial were to develop. So I think as you bring product to market, the key is having a little bit of all your products in each of the villages. And that's one thing you'll see here if you look at the colors. So community gardens, there's plenty of room for that. Is there an effort to do even more in terms of somebody using part of the land for farming for Second Harvest Food Bank? Or, there's tons of opportunity that we've looked at with other projects that could be built into the model for this. But as far as the neighborhoods, yes, there would be a component in each of the villages, both in terms of different housing styles, different price points, different capabilities for a younger homeowner or, somebody in their second or third move-up home to live in the community. And then, as I mentioned, I really would stress our commitment to the, whether it's 55 plus, whether it is independent living or it's assisted living, and all those three have different meanings. But having a component as part of this that allows an aging family member to remain in context to the remainder of the family. I know myself and my wife are going through that right now, and it's great. We made a move recently and about 5 minutes away, and you spend a heck of a lot more time when it's 5 minutes away and not a half an hour drive somewhere, so.
Right. Alderman Berger, you had,
Well, I've got a page and a half of notes and questions. Jeff, you've done a nice job presenting it, and of course, we've already been receiving quite a few emails and concerns, and I think you answered some of my questions, particularly as far as the tree stands and also as far as the stormwater. I'm curious about the commercial services and kind of what the vision and what those commercial services are. And I like the idea that you say people won't have to get in their car, but if you've only got 3,000 square feet of commercial space, probably they're going to get in their car. So that would be something I'd like a little more comment or information in the future. I was curious how many entry points there are into the property, and a little more on the status of the roads around it. I like the idea of the independent and assisted living opportunity there, because that's not traffic generators generally. I'm not a huge fan of this property developing in the county because what we see when these properties are developing in the county is more sprawl, no services in the middle of nowhere. And the folks that are in those developments that we see out in that direction, which are quite large, generate a lot of traffic because they've got to drive this way 30 minutes and back that way 30 minutes. I think Roger's comments about all the plan of services, those are things I think planning is already looking at. I was curious about, is there property there for a fire station? Because that issue was raised by someone. And I'm also curious about when you expect to hear from your consultant. I think that would be very helpful to address. And I don't want to occupy all the time, but this is, with a 4-lane highway going by it, with all the curb cuts there, with all the connectivity that I think you have, this seems like it's something that needs to be in Franklin. So,
Well, thank you.
and I could ask more questions, but I don't want to occupy everybody's time.
I'll take a few of those that I remember. So when we filled out the application for this, and it asked for total number of units and commercial square footage, keep in mind that we did not include anything in these two areas because those are already policied correctly. So what we're talking about is the area that you see the boundary excluding those two. So any commercial area I put into the application is just for little nodes included in each of these villages, like Serenbe, which is a coffee shop, which is a bakery if somebody wants to have it, which is, a candle making shop, whatever it may be. But it is for the little commercial uses centered in each of these villages. The larger commercial retail uses would be here. And when I say larger, it's not policied for a 200,000 square foot retail center. That's not what we're talking here. But it is the larger uses at hand. Would it ever be a grocer? Possibly, but probably not for a long time. But other retail in this area can be retail first floor with some units above it to give the character of a Berry Farms that you see in their commercial node. So that's the general thinking on those areas. So I think connectivity, you can start to see, and one thing, the plan that's in your booklet, the staff had asked, we weren't sure, couldn't tell which were public streets, which were alleys, which were private streets, so we color-coded those. And that's the reason roadways are purple in this, but the bluish purple ones are the public streets that would connect. So every single one of these has at least 2 points of entry with tons of connectivity within that actually village or node. Same thing here with then multiple other opportunities for bypass. If there's a, crash on the main roadway, you're not shutting down that whole node.
Can you connect
Over
those,
here.
are those two villages connectable other than Murfreesboro Road?
Well, the Franklin thoroughfare plan asks for a connection running this way across there. It would mean a fairly expensive bridge over the creek because the floodplain is so wide right there. But that's one thing we can look at, I think, is if that's an item of concern. The only thing we look at is there's so much preservation here, but there certainly wouldn't be development with it. Could it be a secondary? Could it be a connection that isn't a major paved road in some way that would allow fire, that would allow, something like that to use it if the need were there, but doesn't make it part of a paved roadway crossing over the creek and everything? Thoughts?
Yeah, just thoughts right now, exactly.
Okay, I got some more Alderman Berger.
Thank you. So this is, a 20-year project, you said, right?
It is.
These probably.
So when Reese and Steve and the family say a legacy project, I think,
It's not gonna be yours, 20 years.
I know, they,
The trail system that you have here too, also this county, I see Commissioner Lawrence is here. He's been talking with the county. They're doing a study right now on horse trails throughout the city, the county, around the county, connecting to the city. Our Parks Department's been talking with them as well, but they're hiring consultants. So that's coming, and hopefully that can be incorporated in this trail system as well, because that would be ideal. We want to do a lot of connectivity, and Commissioner Lawrence can fill you in with that a little bit more. They're just starting that. But I like that idea. And I like the setback in the front is, how many feet did you say? About?
700 is.
700. And I think that's really helpful, because you want to keep the rural feel along 96. Even though 96 is 4-lane highway, and we know development always happens around these highways, I think keeping that rural feel is extremely important to all of us that you drive out there. I think that's what's going to happen with Armistead as well, driving out, and even West Haven, the setback is pretty nice still there with all the density and in the development later on in the back. Yeah, I think you should think about land, working like with West Haven donated some land for a fire station. We do have in our short and long-term plans to get something out on the east side. So we're looking at another fire station out there, and that would be the ideal place to put it, in that area. So we'd like to talk about that. And I like the idea of the work-live units, but also some of the businesses that we have today, a lot of them do mail-outs. They mail out a lot of their business, or they have businesses where people do pickups, or they do deliveries, and even like a bakery. They may have a place on site where all the people there could use that bakery, or you have places that roast coffee, and they send coffee all over the world.
Right.
And so those are the types of things we could attract to these kinds of developments, like Armistead, this one as well. I know one in West Haven that has that. They have a live-work unit, and they may mail out all over the United States for their business. But other people could also use that area, use that business that live in that area. So, I'm with the mayor on that road. I don't know, we need to have a serious talk about access between the villages and stuff like that. But that's way down the road. You can talk about that later, but thank you very much. I think that's all my comments.
Alderman Potts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've got a few comments, a few questions, similar to what my peers have already stated. First is I'm really excited, and I looked it up, 494 acres, just shy of 5. But when you take the 332 acres of open space, it's 67% open space. So,
It has to be 70 is but
right.
10% of that can be programmed open space in the development, which I think we're going to absolutely commit to having a bunch of that.
Perfect.
stuff. Yes.
Okay, good. Want to make sure that, and if we can even go above that, I know it's a big ask, but that's what the numbers show right now. I agree with what the mayor said. I'm glad to hear that you're bringing on the consultant for the pro forma. Very interested to see what that data is going to show. I do agree. You use the word complex project. It is a very complex legacy project. And I think it's essential that we be as transparent with all the city and the county residents as you move forward in this process, if it does move forward. I will talk about Rural Gateway on the east here in a second, but I do like the being reset off 700 foot off of Highway 96. I think that's great. I am interested, though, I've heard fire station mentioned 2 or 3 times already, is to know if that fire station is going to sit on Highway 96, if that's an option or not. And to know that I think it was a great point, our ISO rating that we have right now, that it's not negatively impacted based on what this could, this potential development could bring. I did have a concern on, and I love what you've got as far as generational transition between being a younger, new family, maybe without kids, having kids, but Fly Park is your closest park right now. And I use that park probably 2 to 3 times a week, and parking's already at overflow status. People parking in the medians right now. I think that there's got to be some type of partnership with the county right now for additional parking. Something's got to be done there. I did have a question. If you are looking at your East Village, and I know you said this is going to be phased out, but that main road that comes in and touches Highway 96, are you going to put in a parallel, we'll call it a wide greenway path that's going to go all the way up to the tunnel so that your residents that live in that East Village area are going to be able to bike, walk, jog, ride their golf cart, whatever it's going to be to get to that underground, that tunnel?
Yeah, I think our vision was to bring them across through the open space.
Okay.
More than out here and down, but that is the location that's right to the west edge of that roadway crossing is where that is located. So our vision was to use these trails, some of which paved, some of which stabilized, but not a asphalt trail.
Okay.
So you have some that are ADA compliant, you have some that are more rural walking trails, but to be able to get people to that, yes.
Okay, good. Then the last thing I've got here is regarding both of those major intersections or significant intersections that you've got right there, I'd like to see those designed with stonework, kind of the stone walls that we see around Franklin, because it does provide that gateway sense. And I'd like to see more of that. I think about at McEwen, I think about at Hillsborough and Mac Hatcher, making sure that they're designed in that way.
You're talking dry
Good
stack,
comment.
correct?
Yes, the dry stack stones.
Yeah.
Is that something that goes throughout our city?
Yeah.
And that's a more development plan specific, and I agree. Well, first of all, of done business with the Smiths for a long time before I was alderman, and this land use decision has nothing to do with that, but, and that's what this is a land use decision.
Right.
And I appreciate them because I've known them for a long time, is that they have really been thoughtful about this. And right now, you mentioned it, in maybe alluded to the fact that there's no desire to develop this property under its current policy. And I think Planning Commission needs to consider this as well, because you are the Planning Commission and planning is important, is, well, how does that affect the planning of the rest of the area long-term? And if that is not, and I believe, in fact, that they would develop this in the county, as it's already able to do, but I've been a huge advocate for Village Green across the city, as many of you all have, Harlan and various other things, because this is what people want to see, which is large amounts of open space accessible, variety of types of houses. Now, this is not the development plan, so I don't want to get into all those specifics. In a manner that respects the character of the area. And if you go drive down 96 and you look at the hill that's in the bottom right-hand corner of these images, and the view blocking that it has to that eastern village, or the south, whatever you're calling it, South Village, East Village. I think there are so many components to this from a planning standpoint that, in a land use planning standpoint, frankly, just to have access to sewer. If y'all had been in BOMA meetings and heard this, Mr. Ingraham on the north side, and the challenges that thousands of acres of that side of the UGB are going to have if sewer is not out there, we might as well. I mean, and this is what some of the residents want, is just cut off that side of the whole UGB. And they'll probably applaud that, and that's okay. Everybody can have their opinion, but as planners, we got to look at, there are some bottlenecks on that eastern side, and this is one of them. So how do you do it appropriately? From a land use plan, I think they've shown and demonstrated, although this is not development plan, I'm not speaking on a development plan. This is this the best use for the land? And I believe it is. I do believe the bridge for the connectivity, again, I think this becomes development plan centric, so I don't want to touch too much on it because this is a land use plan amendment that is before you all, not BOMA. I think that does kind of defeat the purpose of the conservation area if you were to build a large bridge across the stream. I don't believe it is in keeping with the idea that we wanted to preserve the view sheds. When you have the view shed cut off in half by a large bridge, I believe that could be complicating the intent, and that would be a situation where the process really gets in the way of the outcome that I think we all have wanted with this land use plan. Other than that, I think that the size. How big is West Haven? Is it 3,500 units? I think it's larger than that. It's 3,500. I looked it up before it came, but I wanted to get some.
And growing.
Acreage-wise, it's about 3x.
3 times
Yes.
this, right? And so.
500, that's, West Haven was 1,500.
Right.
And I think that's where I want to be clear, and this is the question, those are my statements. So I think it'd be good for us as a planning commission, the public to hear, or them as a planning commission, us as BOMA, is kind of scale, like reflective, and this may be development plan, but also land use plan. Like some of our other larger developments that people think of, West Haven, you've compared to Fieldstone Farms, you brought up, a kind of scale of units versus those others. I think this is, and you don't have to answer that on the fly, but I think as you come back, that's what this is for, it's kind of feedback sessions. I think you'll find that this is, I don't know this, but it just from the rough kind of count, I think it's significantly smaller than the other larger developments we have in Franklin, significantly smaller. And I think that's important for us to reiterate and for the folks to know as we're planning for this, because a lot of times when you think this size of acreage development, you think massive. well, actually, because of our land use plan, if this is appropriate and you know, it actually is not that big. So those are my comments, but I think that context, when you begin to share development plan specifics and that kind of thing, kind of those kinds of relations would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close to running out of time, so I got a couple of planning commissioners that, okay.
I was a few minutes late. I just wanted to say I sit on a nonprofit board with one of the members of the applicant's family, but that's not going to impact my independent judgment. So, but I wanted to say that. You know, all last year we had this property as Village Green. There were a lot of discussions, community involvement, and it wasn't until the Planning Commission to finalize Envision Franklin Amendment that it was changed at the last second. I'm still struggling to understand what that change was. I know I supported Village Green throughout, and I still today seeing, I don't want to dive into the development plan because I don't think this is the right stage to what Alderman Bagat said, but you know, I think when you're comparing, what we're doing now is it's currently rural reserve, and we're analyzing, should we change this to Village Green? And I don't see any benefit over rural reserve to Village Green in this scenario. And we have an applicant who has a business case for Village Green that doesn't apply to rural reserve. And I think it'd be a big mistake if we lost out on an opportunity to do a development like this because we got hung up on rural reserve. I think a 70% open space and a design that looks substantially similar to what's presented, even though I know we have some tweaks, I think would be, I think something we would regret. And so I think we just need to look at ourselves and say, why were we okay with it all year until the last second when we weren't? So I support a Village Green. I think the development plan, yeah, we certainly have some comments. We can tweak some things, some improvements. But as far as the land use plan, I think Village Green is the right designation.
Okay.
Steve, you got a lot of mixed housing types, diverse housing, and I need to know, what's the total number, just conceptually right now? I know you probably don't have an exact figure, but the number of residents that are going to.
What I put in the application is somewhere between 1,350 and 1,400, which is slightly under 3 units to the acre gross density.
Okay. And has there been any, and this is probably a premature question too, as far as the schools, how that would affect the schools that the students will be attending? Are there any numbers, any thoughts, any figures on any of that?
We will get there on all that. No, we have not gone there. I think step one is to make sure this collective body has interest.
Okay, I got you.
That's what the family, I think, is committed to doing. I think we see it as a great opportunity for both parties to benefit long-term. So the first thing is to bring it to you and say, do you have interest? You know, the school's going to be the same, whether it's the county in 1 acre lots or, you know, the numbers may change. Those types of housing versus, you know, some of the housing types we have in here. You know, do the families that look for a townhome or a condo flat have less kids than a 4-bedroom house?
I got you.
You know, so I think those are all things to evaluate going forward.
And I did like hearing about the 700 feet setback. That's pretty good.
And I want to clarify just one thing. The light green area you see is that farmstead. That's where the barns are today. And, you know, we're going to look for a use there, whether that's residential or perhaps something like Harlansdale proposed, you know, in terms of, I think they had kind of a boutique, little farm-themed bed and breakfast, hotel, whatever. I think those are all things to look at going forward. But that's the only use that would maintain the farm theme in the buildings that are there today in front of that.
Okay, let's see.
Alderman Peterson?
Just one question because I really appreciate other people saying things, and
Yeah, me too.
some of them I've been interested in. If you're looking at the East Village there, what is the connection to Trinity Road? I mean, I see in the North Village that you're talking about being connecting to North Chapel there, but
that is Trinity Road right there coming in, a split median little park at
Right.
the entryway coming in. And then this is more the true heart of that village with some units above retail, just in that little, those three buildings encircling that node. So that would be the coffee shop, the opportunity. The lots are introduced there because they back up into the hills and more of the tree cover.
But if you're talking about going over to Trinity, a lot of, many of the lots that are already built on are very large lots, you know, just to the east, away from, you know, past your property, I mean, this
Right.
property. There are a number of very large lot homes.
And I think our solution there was jump to the west side of the creek. You see running down through here, that has tree lines in it, preserve all of that, and then start, that's probably about 300 feet, 250 feet reserved from Trinity Road back to the first residential lot.
Okay.
Okay?
Roger, may I interject one thing?
Very quickly.
I don't know about Page, I haven't asked about that yet, but Trinity has 137 open seats right now,
Okay.
Trinity Elementary.
That's shocking.
I did find that out.
One other comment. Planning Commissioner Marcia Allen called this afternoon. She had a death in her family and couldn't attend tonight, but wanted to provide her feedback. And her statement is that Envision Franklin was just recently updated, and that since the time of that update, there really haven't been any real significant changes that have occurred in the area that would warrant a change to the design concept. So I render that. And then one final statement, I guess from my perspective, the horse barn and the big old white barn are really kind of characteristic. They're a neat component of that property, and I hope that if perhaps through an agri-hood or a Serenbe style application, that something can be done to incorporate that into the grand plan of what the East Village becomes, and it's just part of what that property is. So,
Mr. Chair, could I just say one
Yes, right.
last thing? I just wanted to reiterate, I know this is, the annexation initiation step goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, but because we will be discussing the draft plan of services, we are currently tracking for the January 14th BOMA work session. For the planning commissioners who may be interested in hearing what's in that draft plan of service, you can either watch it online, you can attend in person, but I just wanted you to be aware that that's the date we're currently tracking for. And there will be a lot of information discussed on how services are provided, what would be required as part of that plan of services. And I think you'll get a lot more information at that stage.
okay. All right. Mr. Hines, thank you very much.
Thank
With
you,
that,
folks.
we are adjourned.
And thank you for the water. You saved me.